Hello everyone. Today we are going to finish up the DSO138 build. So in the last couple episodes here we've attached the through-hole resistors, the through-hole inductors, the little package, and the chip. We also did all of the surface mount resistors. So for the diodes, what you want to do is make sure that the line on the diode matches up with the line on the PCB. You're going to want to pre-bend the leads a little bit here. The spacing on the PCB is actually quite wide for these, so it's fairly easy to bend them into the correct position. We're going to do the same thing with the second diode here. We're going to pre-bend the leads a little bit. We're going to make sure that the line on the PCB matches up with the line on the diode. We're going to fasten the diodes down here with a bit of poster tack, and then we're going to solder the diodes in place here before we move on to the crystal. So one of the things I noticed while soldering the through-hole resistors last time was that there isn't very much thermal mass to the pads on this board, and they're fairly difficult to actually get the soldering iron in to heat them up. So this time I'm going to apply flux beforehand to most of them. That should help it out a little bit. Next is the crystal here. It goes into the slot Y1. There is no polarity on the crystal, so you don't have to worry about that. Next up we have the 5 buttons. Those should be these 4-hole pads here. Before we do anything else, I'm going to apply flux to the pads. It's time for the ceramic capacitors now. We're going to start with the lower value ones because they're a fair bit smaller than the higher value ones. Now we'll do the higher value ceramic capacitors. These ones are much easier because they're all the same value, so they just go into any of the C holes on the board that do not have a circle around them, or any other markings. We'll attach this one next. So this connector is for hooking up power from a JYE DC to DC converter board, which is an optional add-on you can buy for this kit. So next we have these 3-pin packages here. 2 of these are transistors, and the other 2 I believe are voltage references. It's very important to get them in the correct holes. It would be very bad to put the transistors in the non-transistor holes and the non-transistors in the transistor holes. It's important to remember to line up the flat side of the transistor package with the flat side of the PCB marking. Here we have the variable capacitors. For these ones you want to line up the flat side of the capacitor with the flat side of the PCB marking. So the inductor is super easy, it doesn't have any polarity or anything, so you just put it on the board here and solder it in. The electrolytic capacitors are next. All of the electrolytic capacitors are the same value, so there's no issues there, and they go into all of the remaining capacitor holes that we haven't filled already. You want to put the long lead of the electrolytic capacitor into the square hole on the PCB. The DC barrel jack is super easy to install. It only goes into the slot one direction. It'll take quite a bit more heat and solder than the other components we've done so far, just due to how much thermal mass there is. Be aware of that. So it's important with these header sockets to make sure they're as straight as possible and that they're right against the board. This is where the LCD is going to attach, so if they're slightly offset or anything, it will make it very difficult to attach the LCD. The slide switches here are going to require quite a bit of force to actually get them to go through the holes of the PCB. So these slide switches also have two mounting pins. These two mounting pins are connected directly to the casing of the switch. This means that it's going to take a lot of heat and a lot of solder to actually get these to flow to the board. The two larger pegs of the BNC connector are going to take a lot more heat than the copper middle pin, so you might want to switch to a heavier tip for this. Otherwise, you can just apply more heat and just be a bit more patient. You want to make sure that this flows really well. These are the grounding pins. So the final step of the build here is to attach the header pins to the LCD screen. You want to be very careful with these, not to touch the screen anywhere with the soldering iron and not to heat up any one pin for too long. You also need to make sure that the pins are as level as they can possibly be so that they'll mate up with the female headers on the bottom board easier. And try to avoid any static shocks to the LCD screen. Other than that, it's just standard soldering. I hope you enjoyed this kit build. There's still a few things that I have left to do, but we'll do those in the next video where we try this out a bit. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you didn't enjoy it, then you can give it a dislike. If you wish to share it, feel free. If you have any questions or comments about the video, please leave them in the section below. Otherwise, you can email them to me or you can tweet them to me. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Every subscriber helps. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day.